The train rattled through endless prairie as Catherine pressed her forehead against the cold window glass. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed, a ghost of the woman she'd been 3 months ago. The advertisement had promised a new life, a prosperous rancher seeking a wife, a home in the Dakota Territory where she could escape the suffocating poverty of Boston. She'd believed every word because she'd needed to believe. Her father's debts had consumed everything after his death, leaving her with 2 choices, the factory or the frontier. She chose the frontier. She chose a man named Harold Brennan, whose letters spoke of vast lands and comfortable living. His words had been careful and formal, but she'd read warmth between the lines that perhaps wasn't there. At 23, Catherine understood that love was a luxury. Survival was what mattered. The other passengers avoided her eyes, sensing the desperation that clung to mail-order brides like cheap perfume. She clutched her small carpet bag containing everything she owned, 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, and a locket with her parents' faces inside. The landscape outside transformed from rolling hills to flat grasslands that stretched to the horizon. She'd never seen so much sky, so much emptiness. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. This was freedom, even if it came wrapped in uncertainty. The conductor announced their approach to Redemption Creek, and Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. She smoothed her traveling dress, tucked loose strands of auburn hair behind her ears, and tried to remember how to smile. The station was little more than a wooden platform surrounded by dust and disappointment. She stepped down carefully, searching the handful of waiting faces for someone who might be Harold Brennan. A tall man with cold blue eyes and a thick mustache approached her. His clothes were fine, his boots expensive, but something in his expression made her stomach clench. Catherine Murphy. His voice was flat, assessing. Yes, sir. Mr. Brennan? He nodded once, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her feel like livestock at auction. You're thinner than I expected. Can you work hard? The question caught her off guard. I'm stronger than I look, sir. You'd better be. I didn't pay good money to bring you out here for decoration. He grabbed her bag without asking and started toward a wagon. Catherine followed, her earlier hope crumbling with each step. This wasn't the life the letters had promised. This was something else entirely. The ride to his ranch took 2 hours through desolate country. Harold spoke only to criticize her posture, her appearance, her silence. The ranch, when they finally arrived, was substantial but cheerless. The house needed paint, the yard needed care, and everything felt empty despite its size. He showed her to a small room off the kitchen. We'll marry tomorrow at the church. Tonight you'll clean the house and prepare supper. There's a chicken needs killing. He left her standing there, stunned and alone. Catherine sat on the narrow bed and finally let the tears come. She traveled 2,000 miles to trade one prison for another. But she had no money for a return ticket, no family to wire for help, no options at all. The sunset through her small window painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the distance, she heard singing, strange and beautiful, carried on the wind from the Lakota settlement beyond the ridge. The sound was haunting and oddly comforting, a reminder that she wasn't the only soul struggling under this vast sky. She dried her tears, unpacked her mother's Bible, and tried to pray for strength she didn't feel. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Harold Brennan, and the door to her old life would close forever. The church was small and smelled of old wood and older prayers. Catherine stood in her best dress, the ivory one she'd carefully preserved for this moment, and felt nothing but numbness. The preacher's words washed over her like distant thunder while Harold stood rigid beside her, his hand gripping her elbow too tightly. There were no guests, no flowers, no joy. Just a transaction being formalized before God and a bored clerk serving as witness. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Harold's kiss was brief and cold, a stamp of ownership rather than affection. They signed the papers in silence. Catherine's hand trembled as she wrote her new name for the first time, Catherine Brennan. The letters looked wrong, like they belonged to someone else. The ride back to the ranch was worse than the day before. Harold had been drinking, she could smell it on him, and his mood had darkened considerably. He complained about the cost of the ceremony, the waste of time, how she'd better prove worth the investment. Catherine kept her eyes on the horizon and said nothing, learning already that silence was safer than words. Back at the house, he told her to prepare a meal while he conducted business. She moved through the kitchen mechanically, finding supplies, starting a fire in the stove. Her hands knew what to do even as her mind screamed for escape. She'd made a terrible mistake, but it was too late to undo it. The law recognized her as his property now, his to command. Dinner was a tense affair. Harold criticized everything. The meat was tough, the bread too dense, the coffee too weak. Nothing satisfied him. When she rose to clear the plates, he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks. "Sit down. I'm not finished with you." Catherine froze, terror flooding her veins. His eyes held something dark and dangerous. But before he could speak again, shouting erupted from outside. Men's voices, urgent and alarmed. Harold cursed and released her, striding to the door. She followed at a distance and saw 3 ranch hands pointing toward the eastern pasture. Something was wrong with the cattle, they said, animals scattered and panicked. Harold barked orders and grabbed his rifle. "Stay in the house," he commanded Catherine without looking at her, then rode off with his men into the gathering dusk. Left alone, Catherine felt the house close in around her. She stepped onto the porch, gulping fresh air, and that's when she saw them. 3 Lakota riders on the ridge, silhouetted against the dying sun. They weren't moving, just watching. Harold had warned her about the natives, called them savages and thieves, said they resented the rancher's presence. But from this distance, they simply looked like men, and she felt more afraid of her husband than she did of strangers on a hill. One of the riders moved closer, and Catherine could see him more clearly now. He was tall and broad-shouldered, sitting his horse with natural grace. Even from far away, she sensed he was someone important, someone others followed. He seemed to be looking directly at her, and she couldn't explain why, but she didn't feel threatened. Then the moment shattered. Harold returned at a gallop, screaming at the riders, raising his rifle. Catherine ran toward him without thinking. "No, please." They weren't doing anything. His backhanded strike sent her sprawling in the dirt. "Shut your mouth. Don't you ever contradict me." He fired a warning shot toward the ridge, and the riders disappeared into the twilight. Catherine lay in the dust, tasting blood, her cheek burning. This was her wedding day. This was her new life. The other ranch hands helped her to her feet, their faces carefully blank, pretending they hadn't seen their boss strike his bride of 6 hours. She walked back to the house on unsteady legs while Harold shouted about property lines and Indian threats. That night, she barred her bedroom door and prayed he was too drunk to care. She heard him stumbling through the house, cursing, breaking things. Eventually, silence fell. Catherine lay awake in the darkness, her face throbbing, and wondered if she would survive this marriage. The Lakota singing drifted through her window again, mournful and beautiful. She pressed her fingers to her swollen cheek and wept as quietly as she could manage, mourning the girl she'd been and the future she'd lost in a single day. 3 weeks of marriage taught Catherine that hell was real and located in the Dakota Territory. Harold's cruelty was systematic and creative. He found fault with everything she did, and his punishments ranged from withheld food to bruises she had to hide beneath long sleeves. The ranch hands witnessed it all with downcast eyes, unwilling or unable to intervene. She was alone in a house that felt more like a prison with each passing day. She tried to be the perfect wife, anticipating his needs, keeping silent, making herself invisible. Nothing worked. His anger wasn't about her failures but about something broken inside him that needed an outlet. She was simply convenient. On a cool morning when Harold rode to town for supplies, taking his men with him, Catherine saw her chance. She packed her carpet bag with frantic hands, took what little food wouldn't be immediately missed, and slipped out the back door. She had no plan beyond getting away, no destination except anywhere but here. The train station was 15 miles through open country, but she'd walk barefoot over broken glass if it meant freedom. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions. She'd walked for 2 hours when she heard horses behind her. Terror seized her chest. Harold had returned early and discovered her gone. She tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide in the flat grassland. The riders overtook her quickly, and she spun around, prepared to beg for mercy. But it wasn't Harold. 3 Lakota men sat on their horses, watching her with cautious curiosity. The same 3 from the ridge on her wedding night. The leader sat tall and composed, his long dark hair decorated with feathers, his face marked by strength and intelligence. His eyes held a question but no threat. Catherine stumbled backward, her mind racing with Harold's warnings about savage Indians. But these men had made no move toward her, hadn't shouted or raised weapons. They simply waited, as if giving her time to understand they meant no harm. The leader spoke in accented but clear English. "You are running from the white man's ranch." It was a statement, not a question. He'd seen the bruises on her face, the fear in her eyes, the desperate way she'd been walking toward nothing. "Please," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "I just need to reach the train station. I have to get away." The man exchanged glances with his companions. "The town is far. You will not reach it before he finds you." He gestured to her thin dress, her inappropriate shoes. You will not survive the journey. Catherine's legs gave out and she sank to her knees in the grass. She'd known it was hopeless even as she'd tried. Sobs racked her body, 3 weeks of terror and pain finally overwhelming her fragile control. She was trapped. There was no escape from Harold Brennan, no future except more of the same until he killed her or she died trying to flee. Strong hands lifted her gently to her feet. The Lakota leader studied her with something like compassion in his dark eyes. I am Running Bear, chief of my people. We have watched the white man hurt you. This is not right, not among my people or yours. Then help me, Catherine begged, past pride or propriety. Please, I'll die if I go back there. Running Bear was quiet for a long moment, weighing options she couldn't fathom. Finally, he nodded slowly. Come. You will be safe with us until we decide what must be done. He extended his hand, and Catherine took it without hesitation. He pulled her up onto his horse with surprising gentleness, and she found herself sitting in front of him, his arms steady around her as they rode. Behind them, one of his companions erased their tracks from the prairie grass. They were taking her to the Lakota settlement, the place Harold had taught her to fear, and she felt safer in this moment than she had since leaving Boston. Running Bear's people lived in a camp of hide lodges arranged in a great circle. Women looked up from their work, children stopped playing, warriors paused in their tasks. A white woman arriving in their midst was clearly unexpected, and Catherine saw curiosity, suspicion, and sympathy in their faces. An older woman approached, speaking rapidly in Lakota. Running Bear responded in the same language, his tone respectful but firm. The woman's expression softened as she looked at Catherine's bruised face. She said something else, and Running Bear nodded. This is Quiet Stream, a healer and wise woman. She will tend your injuries and give you shelter. You are under my protection now. The white man cannot harm you here. Catherine wanted to ask what would happen when Harold came looking for her, wanted to know what price these people might pay for their kindness, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Quiet Stream guided her into a lodge, sat her down on soft furs, and began examining her injuries with practiced hands. The woman's touch was gentle, her manner soothing even though Catherine understood none of her words. Catherine woke to unfamiliar sounds and smells. The lodge was warm despite the cool morning air, and sunlight filtered through the hide walls in golden streams. For a confused moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory returned, Harold's cruelty, her failed escape, Running Bear's intervention. She was in a Lakota camp, under the protection of their chief, and she had no idea what came next. Quiet Stream entered carrying a bowl of something that smelled wonderful. The older woman smiled and gestured for Catherine to eat. The food was different from anything she'd known, meat and wild vegetables in a rich broth, but it was delicious and she was starving. Quiet Stream watched her eat with approval, then brought water and fresh clothes, simple leather garments softer than anything Catherine owned. The woman's kindness was overwhelming. No one had cared for Catherine like this since her mother died years ago. Tears streamed down her face as Quiet Stream helped her wash and dress, gently braiding her auburn hair. The healer clucked sympathetically and said something in Lakota that sounded like comfort. Running Bear appeared at the lodge entrance, waiting for permission to enter. Quiet Stream called out, and he stepped inside, his tall frame filling the small space. In daylight, Catherine could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with strong features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. There was authority in the way he carried himself, but also something unexpected, gentleness. You slept well? He asked, settling across from her. Catherine nodded, suddenly shy. Thank you for helping me. I don't know why you did, but I'm grateful. Running Bear was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My people know what it means to be hunted, to be without protection. We do not abandon those in need, even strangers. It is our way. Harold will come looking for me, Catherine said, fear tightening her throat. He'll be angry. He'll want me back, or he'll want revenge. He came yesterday while you slept, Running Bear said calmly. With many men and guns. He demanded we return his property. Catherine's heart stopped. What happened? I told him you were under my protection and he had no claim here. I told him that a man who beats a woman is no man at all, and we do not recognize his ownership. He threatened war. Running Bear's expression hardened. I told him to bring his war. My people have survived worse than angry white ranchers. But you'll be in danger because of me, Catherine whispered, guilt crushing her chest. Your people could be hurt. Maybe I should go back. Maybe if I... No. Running Bear's voice was firm but not harsh. You speak like someone who believes she deserves suffering. You do not. What that man did to you is wrong by any measure, white or Lakota. You will stay here until we find a way to ensure your safety. Over the following days, Catherine learned to navigate her strange new world. The Lakota people were wary at first, unsure what to make of the white woman in their midst, but quiet streams acceptance opened doors. Women taught her their language, their customs, their ways of working leather and gathering food. Children overcame their shyness and played around her, fascinated by her pale skin and red hair. Running Bear visited often, teaching her about his people's beliefs and listening to her stories of life in Boston. He was unlike any man she'd known, thoughtful, curious, unafraid of silence or emotion. He spoke of his responsibility to his people, the pressure of leading them through increasingly difficult times as white settlers claimed more land. My wife died 3 winters ago, he told her one evening as they sat by the fire. She was carrying our child. Both were lost. Since then, I have focused only on my duties as chief. I thought my heart had turned to stone. Catherine heard the unspoken words beneath his confession. She felt it too, this unexpected connection forming between them. It was impossible, inappropriate, dangerous for both of them. She was a married woman under the law, he was a chief with a people to protect. But the heart, she was learning, did not care about such practicalities. I should leave, she said quietly. Not back to Harold, but away from here. I'm bringing you trouble. Running Bear shook his head. You brought something else. You reminded me that there is more to life than survival and duty. You reminded me how to feel. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, the bruises now faded to yellow shadows. Stay. Please. Harold Brennan returned with the territorial marshal and a dozen armed men. Catherine watched from Running Bear's lodge as they rode into camp, their horses kicking up dust, their faces set with righteous anger. Her hands trembled but Running Bear's presence beside her was steady and calm. The marshal was a weather-beaten man named Collins who'd clearly dealt with such situations before. He approached Running Bear with cautious respect, aware he was walking a knife's edge between law and bloodshed. Chief, I need you to surrender the white woman. She's legally married, which makes her husband's property under territorial law. I don't like it any more than you do, but that's how it is. Running Bear stood tall, his people gathered behind him. Your law says a woman is property. My law says no person owns another. Which law is just? I'm not here to debate philosophy, Collins said tiredly. I'm here to prevent violence. Give her back and we'll leave peacefully. Catherine stepped forward before Running Bear could respond. Her voice shook but carried clearly. Marshal Collins, I want to tell you what my husband did to me. Harold shouted for her to shut her mouth, but Collins raised a hand. Let her speak. She told everything. The beatings, the starvation, the threats, the systematic cruelty. She pulled back her sleeves to show the fading bruises, unbuttoned her collar to reveal the marks on her throat from when he choked her for burning his supper. The ranch hands who'd come with Harold shifted uncomfortably, unable to deny what they'd witnessed. She's lying. Harold snarled, but his face betrayed him. Collins studied Catherine for a long moment, then turned to the ranch hands. Is she telling the truth? The men exchanged glances. Finally, one spoke up. Yes, sir. Brennan's got a mean temper. We all seen him hit her, more than once. The marshal rubbed his jaw, clearly frustrated by the situation. What he did was wrong, but the law is the law. You're his wife. Then your law is broken, Running Bear said quietly. A law that protects men who hurt women is not worthy of respect. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Catherine saw fingers moving toward guns, saw Running Bear's warriors tensing for battle. Everything was about to explode into violence, and it would be her fault. Then a new voice called out. Marshal Collins. Hold a moment. A buggy approached from town carrying Father Michael, the priest who'd married Catherine and Harold. Behind him rode Judge Harrison, the circuit judge Catherine had heard about but never seen. They'd come from Redemption Creek at speed, clearly alerted to the situation. Father Michael climbed down, his face grave. Marshal, I must speak with you and the judge. The 3 men conferred quietly while everyone waited. Catherine watched Harold's confidence waver as the priest spoke, showing them documents from his jacket. Judge Harrison's expression darkened as he read. Finally, they approached the group. Mr. Brennan, the judge said coldly, Father Michael has shown me proof that you were already married when you wed Mrs. Murphy. Your first wife lives in Kansas, which makes your marriage to this woman invalid. She is not your wife and never was. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Harold had deceived her from the beginning, had brought her west under false pretenses. Relief and rage warred in Catherine's chest. Harold tried to bluster, to deny it, but Collins cut him off. "You're also under arrest for fraud and assault. Mount up." As the marshal led Harold away in chains, Judge Harrison approached Catherine. "You're free under the law. The marriage is void. I'm sorry for what you endured." Catherine felt Running Bear's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "What will you do now?" he asked quietly. "Will you return to your people's world?" She looked at the Lakota camp, at Quiet Stream beaming with joy, at the children she'd grown to love, at the life she'd glimpsed here. Then she looked at Running Bear, at the hope and fear mingled in his eyes. The law said she was free. Her heart said she was home. "I'd like to stay," she whispered. "If you'll have me." Running Bear's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "My people will have you. And I would have you as my wife, if you would honor me. Not as property, but as a partner. As my equal in all things." Father Michael cleared his throat. "I could perform a ceremony, if you wish. A proper one, recognized by both your peoples." Catherine took Running Bear's hands in hers, feeling the calluses earned through hard work and care for his people. "Yes," she said clearly. "I would be honored to be your wife." The wedding happened 3 days later, with both Lakota rituals and Christian elements woven together. Catherine wore a beautiful dress of white deerskin that Quiet Stream had made, decorated with beadwork that told the story of her journey from sorrow to joy. Running Bear wore his finest regalia, and his eyes never left her face. Judge Harrison attended, along with several townspeople who'd heard the story and come to witness this unprecedented union. As the sun set over the prairie, Catherine and Running Bear stood together, two people from different worlds who'd found something rare and precious, genuine love born from compassion, respect, and shared suffering. She'd come west as a mail-order bride, expecting only survival. She found something far greater, a home, a people, and a man who saw her not as property but as the answer to his prayers. Her tears had been met with compassion, and that compassion had transformed both their lives forever.